Greetings. I'd like to welcome you here today for another daily devotion. We've been going through the book of Matthew, and today's verse is from Matthew 5, verse 4. It says, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." Really popular verse. We quote it all the time, especially when someone loses a loved one. But what exactly did Jesus mean when he said in his famous Sermon on the Mount, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted"? Well, the first thing we have to realize is that Jesus' message here was directed towards his disciples as he sat down with them in verse 1. He's expounding on inward motives and outward conduct towards others so they can begin to reflect on God's character and reflect that to the world around them. And I'm going to be honest with you, the bar Jesus sets is so high that no one except for Jesus alone is going to be able to fulfill them perfectly. So the intent he has for us is that his sermon would draw us towards God and appeal to his grace and mercy as we recognize our own failure and ask him for grace and forgiveness. But we should also ask him to strengthen us by the power of his Spirit when our faithfulness and our faith is tested by the content of his sermon here. So he begins today's verse with a phrase, "Blessed are." This means much more than inward happiness based upon outward circumstances like plenty of food or friends or finances. In the Bible, blessed usually means happy. Kind of interesting because in verses 2 through 10, Jesus calls some people blessed or happy who appear to be quite the opposite based on their circumstances. People who mourn don't seem to be blessed according to the standards of the world. So Jesus is contrasting the world's idea of happiness with true blessedness, or in other words, spiritual prosperity that only comes from having a right relationship with God. Blessed are carries with it the idea of spiritual contentment based on the fact that God is pleased with us and we can now delight in the fact that we have communion with him through Christ. Spiritually content are those who mourn, maybe a more accurate way to say it. That seems counterintuitive, what we usually experience. So what does Jesus mean by that? Well, the term mourn means to experience deep grief. Well, the question is, mourn over what? Many will quote this passage in some kind of loss, and it's true, God does comfort in times of affliction, according to 2 Corinthians, but that's not the kind of mourning that Jesus has in mind here, given its context. Context suggests that blessed are those who mourn over sin and evil, especially when it comes to our own personal sin, but also over the failure of mankind as a whole to give God the glory he deserves. In 3 different occasions, Jesus called the Holy Spirit the Comforter. So what he means in this verse are, blessed are those who mourn over sin, as the Spirit comforts those who are honest about their own sin and humble enough to ask God for forgiveness and healing. Isaiah 66:2 says this, "These are those who I look on favor, those who are humble and contrite in spirit and tremble at my word." So those who mourn over their sin and find the very heart of God, and fellowship with God becomes the foundation of true, meaningful happiness. It's a great time for us today to take some self-examination. Do we mourn over sin? It's not a matter of if we sin, but when we sin. So when we sin, does that sin bother us? Do we have a godly grief that leads to a change in behavior? That's the question I want to leave you with today. May the Lord reveal the areas in your own life that are affront to him, and may he give you the strength to overcome it by the power of his Spirit. God bless you guys. We'll see you next time.